For Tim O'Malley and John Bryce, I'm Tim Priester, and this is Irish Illustrated Insider Monday, November 18th. Week number 11 for Notre Dame, or I should say game number 11 for the Fighting Irish, in an unusual set of circumstances. 100 years after the Four Horsemen played against Army in the Polo Grounds, we're going back to Yankee Stadium to play Army, a 9-0 Army football team. Or are they 10-0?
9 and
No,
0.
they're 9-0. They had the week off.
Feels
They're
like they should be 10-0, but they're not
I
0.
know. Well, their season really stretches out. A 9-0 Army football team shooting to go unscathed through a season for the first time since 1949. They've won 13 in a row dating back to last year. And Marcus Freeman said today when we went to his 12:30 Eastern Time press conference that it's a really good, it's a physical football team. It's not, and he said this, it's not Navy 2.0. There's a different approach. They don't throw it as much as Navy does, but they're a more physical team. And it starts up front where their offensive and defensive lines are very physical.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one for a little while, at least since the Navy game when I realized how well Notre Dame could defend the option. I think it's going to be, I know it's not the actual Navy offense, but there's a lot you could take from it after talking to Al Golden a couple times about defending triple option offenses and option based offenses. I think the last few weeks has been a march to Army and USC. Florida State had no chance. Virginia had very little chance. And I think it might be good that Notre Dame struggled intermittently offensively, or for the bulk of the first half against Virginia. There's a lot to clean up. If you did that against Army, you would not get, first of all, you would not get 10 first half possessions. If you did that against Army, you might not have gotten 10 possessions. So plenty to clean up on film. And as Marcus Freeman said, there's plenty of good when you run for 232 yards against Virginia as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that sticks out to me is talking about the physicality of that Army team, and a point we made on instant analysis immediately after Marcus's press conference, and that is the age, the veteran, the maturity of this Army football team. And it looks like in their projected starting offense, they've got 8 juniors or seniors, and on the defensive side of the ball, they have 9 juniors and seniors. And so that shows you those are guys that are veteran players. Obviously, they're veterans, and then they have played a lot of football in the same system. And that's why I think it's a significant difference to compare Army and Navy, because the tendency is to view them fairly similarly. But again, this is just year 2 of a complete reset at Navy. And this is year 11 for Jeff Monken at Army. He's one of, at this point in time, the veteran most coaches anywhere in FBS football.
We're going to jump back to Army. I just want to introduce that scenario as Notre Dame goes into Yankee Stadium to play undefeated Army. But we do want to wrap up Notre Dame's 35-14 victory over Virginia. Tim, I mean, I think you were right that Virginia had very little chance of beating Notre Dame, but I do think that, well, first of all, we expected Anthony Colandrea to play a lot better football than he did. Man, he was just handing the football to Notre Dame after the fake punt fiasco that turned into a fiasco. But Notre Dame great defensively once again. 5 turnovers, are now third in the country. I guess they were third in the country, still third in the country in turnover margin. They really did an excellent job of containing Xavier Brown and Kobe Pace, who have done some good things in the running game this year. And then they turn it over to Jeremiah Love for the beautiful 77-yard run. The breakdown of that play is in today's tail of the tape. And it's really, Tim, you mentioned it, but it's fascinating to see. I mean, Jeremiah Love, he knows that he's faster than whoever is trailing him. He knows how fast he has to run in order to complete the 77-yard run. And there never appeared to be a look of any type of body language that expressed doubt about his ability to beat anybody that was chasing him. He's a beautiful runner. He's run with physicality. There was another play. He ended up with 137 yards on 16 carries, both of which were season highs for him. There was another play. It was a short yardage third down. Maybe it was a fourth down, which,
It was fourth down. Yeah, it
yeah,
was a fourth.
it was in the second half, because most of the third downs and the long yardage downs in the first half were, 12, 16, 22 yards. And naturally, Riley Leonard is going to struggle with those because that's not his forte. But a power run by Jeremiah Love on fourth down in the second half just showed what a complete back he has become.
Yeah, when they can stay out of third and long. It's a dangerous offense. That's where the catch-22 is for Denbrock, because I remember watching. I said it to you at one point. I don't know if it was 3rd and 8 at midfield, and they threw, and I thought, why not just run so you could go for it on 4th down? But here's the problem. Every time you want to stay ahead of the chains, you're not taking a shot. You're being a little too conservative. So when Notre Dame's passing a lot on 1st down, or when Notre Dame's doing something creative on 1st down, it could put you behind the chains, but that's how you have to evolve the offense. It just didn't work this time. You could try things that don't work too. I really think Riley Leonard will run more against Army. I can't ever ding an offensive coordinator with weapons for being more aggressive, but if it did put them in 9 3rd and long situations. So and you're not going to convert too many of them.
I do think a good point is the game control that Notre Dame has had. Again, I've said that's not a metric I've paid a lot of credence to probably until this year. But then we noted last week going into the Virginia game that Notre Dame really had played very fine football in 34 out of 36 quarters. And you can hash it. You could probably say another 3 quarters over the weekend against Virginia that Notre Dame played well. But I do think because of Notre Dame's game control in these contests, that it has enabled Denbrock to be a little bit stubborn in terms of trying to expand the offense and trying to open up the offense. And so when Notre Dame is controlling these games and the defense is that dominant, you can figure out, you can take a little bit more time, be a little bit more patient and trying to figure out, can we do some more things offensively? Can we get some more people involved so that we are a tougher scout, so that people don't necessarily think the instant we take Riley Leonard's legs away, we take away Notre Dame's entire offense.
Notre Dame, they were behind the chains the entire first half, and it was a result of 9 penalties. And we can argue back and forth about the fake punt. I think that's rather than right or wrong. I think it's more of an interpretation thing. I think when us laymen read the rule book and it says whatever the specific wording was about where Jack Kaiser was located, I think officials, actual referees, differ on the verbiage there, but that's not my point. That's neither here nor there. My point is Notre Dame committed 9 penalties, or were whistled for 9 penalties, and however you feel about the fake punt, the other 8 were legit. The other 8 were like, you hate to, here's another face hands to the face penalty. That doesn't mean that they're wrong. There were 3 of them. They were all legitimate. Pat Coogan had his hand in the face mask of the opposing player on the 78-yard touchdown pass, or what would have been a touchdown pass to Jaden Harrison. It was self-imposed. Notre Dame got behind the chains, and that was largely, that was essentially why they were 1 for 12 on 3rd down.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bad call on the 38-yard gain against the Irish defense for sure. But that's if you're not talking about that was definitely not a catch. I mean, that was 100% not a catch on the 38-yard gain.
That wasn't
so
a penalty. That wasn't
yes.
a penalty. I'm
sorry. It's officiating. Yeah, it's no. I mean, illegal hands to the face is an issue because if Virginia was any good at all, that would have been a problem. I mean, if Virginia's a 3-touchdown underdog and was outplaying Notre Dame for 15 minutes, and Notre Dame still handled them 28-0 at the half. If you're playing a better team, that's a really good team, you can't have those sloppy penalties. That's why when I did the report card, I was like, the penalties have to go under the coaching this time. I know sometimes it's like, well, offensive players commit penalties, defensive players commit penalties, but when it's a rash of them, and I'm removing the fake punt one from that. When it's a rash of them, I feel like that would be, if Notre Dame gets 0 penalties, the coaching staff gets an A+. So when Notre Dame gets 8 or 9 penalties, that's where I had to ding them a little bit. I feel like that's one of those lack of crispness things that sneaks in every once in a while.
Well, and again, I think even more pertinent this week is your point, T.O., in that against a better opponent, those penalties can really hamper you or change the tide of the game. That's especially the case if you have those penalties that either sustain drives for Army or give Army multiple possessions and give the Black Knights too many opportunities to just lay on your defense and keep your offense off the field. I think that Army is the type of team that Notre Dame does not need to get down by a couple of touchdowns against, because that changes the complete dynamics of the game, and then Army can do even more of its offense, its offensive preferences to keep Notre Dame's offense off the field.
And Tim, getting back to your point about what should have been reviewed at the very least, the Malachi Fields catch, Marcus Freeman actually gave I thought, an interesting explanation that there is communication with the official on the sideline with him, and he asked if they were reviewing it, and that official said yes. Well, Virginia picked up the pace then and got the snap off. And this is a piece of information that's passed on to me. There is not there are actually two people in the booth as it relates to reviewing plays. One who is totally focused on watching the replay of it, and the other who is informing him as to what he's seeing down on the field and the timing as to when the offensive team is about ready to snap the football. I don't know what happened with the timing, that they should have called down to the refs on the field to check that. There's no doubt about it. I've been saying that Marcus Freeman he should have called a timeout, but he explained today that he was in communication with the official along the sideline, and so he didn't want to call that, with the notion that they were going to call down the field and stop it. So we can make up things about ACC officials cheating against Notre Dame. 8 of the 9
I'd be pretty
penalties
mad
were
if I was
legit.
Marcus Freeman, if the official said we're going to review it and they snapped the ball. I would have
Absolutely.
called timeout right there. That would have been
No,
my timeout.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm saying
Now we have a
beyond those
question on that.
two,
Yeah.
beyond those two instances, the rest of the penalties were legit. And but that overshadowed a lot. I get that, because not only did you have a 78-yard touchdown pass,
It was 111
callback,
yards and 2 touchdowns
Yeah,
that came
exactly.
from it. So, I mean,
so I get it. I get the frustration, but I also know multiple officials, former and current, in multiple conferences, and I know what sticklers they are for the rules. And are there bad calls made? Of course. Are there renegade officials? I've talked about them when Notre Dame was playing Clemson in years past. I get that. But the officials aren't standing in the middle of the field talking for 3 minutes about a fake punt and conspiring against Notre Dame. They're trying to get it right. And again, that's an interpretation. And I understand that people are going to say that it was unfair to Notre Dame, and so we move on. Okay, guys. To wrap up this segment, we did spend some time with Marcus Freeman. We want to make everybody aware of the fact that Howard Cross III is still listed as questionable for this week against Army, as we talked about in our instant analysis after the Marcus Freeman press conference, and Tim has said it this week. Regardless whether Howard Cross III is playing or not, you list him as questionable, so that Army has to have in the back of their mind that he could play. Maybe he could. It certainly didn't look like it, but he is listed as questionable. So is Devin Ford, a key man on the special teams unit. Jaden Greathouse is not listed on the injury report. That's good news. And we saw during the second half from the TV version that he was moving his arm around, and I would imagine if he was badly hurt, he wouldn't be trying to loosen up that shoulder. I would think that he could have come in the game in the second half, but there was no need to.
that's the biggest surprise to me, that that he could be ready to go. Now, I mean, doesn't mean he's ready to go, of course, but that's still fantastic. I thought he was going to be minimum questionable was going to show up on this report. And the most important part for that is not that Notre Dame doesn't have enough receivers, because Harrison and Faison are streaking, but Jaden Greathouse was streaking before Harrison and Faison. So If he can continue, now they have 3 guys on the upward swing. Bo Collins is not on the upward swing. Jaden Thomas just doesn't play that much anymore.
No, he really doesn't.
Yeah, and you make a great point about Greathouse, because not only was he streaking, but I still contend, especially of those guys you just referenced, Greathouse is the most natural receiver of the bunch, the more polished receiver of the bunch. And again, certainly he has flashed really strong football instincts and vision for his run after the catch. And TP, you had a great stat. I think it was last week's game. He had maybe 42 yards after the catch. That shows you that he's getting the ball and then accelerating upfield and making good decisions.
I asked today about 2 transfers that were in their senior day, their first and last senior day at Notre Dame. One on offense, Jaden Harrison, who, coincidence or not, Riley Leonard's best, maybe Riley Leonard's 2 best passes were both to Jaden Harrison. The 78-yarder was a absolute dart down the middle of the field, and the 25-yarder in the second half converted a 3rd and 15, which was a great throw. So he's on the upswing. And Rod Hurd, I was asking you guys, which game did Rod Hurd play really well at home? And it was Louisville. So, I mean, he stepped forward then and he had a big time step forward against Virginia. Great to see those guys who haven't always had the largest role here in their transfer year, really step forward and play some good football.
He was my defensive MVP until everything just went off the rails.
Rod
And
Hurd,
all of
yeah.
a sudden, Xavier
Yeah.
Watts is picking up fumble or intercepting passes. But my defensive MVP was the secondary because Rod Hurd forced a fumble that Xavier Watts recovered. Don Schuler intercepted a pass to set up a 2-yard touchdown. Xavier Watts intercepted a pass that could have set up a field goal. They just played. Leonard Morris intercepted a pass that set up a touchdown. They were fantastic. I cannot get over how good the secondary is when we're talking about the All-American. One of the 2 All-Americans has been out since midseason.
Unbelievable.
It's ridiculous.
It's
Even one of the
unbelievable.
rotational players, there has been zero need for Jaden Mickey, who hit the transfer portal.
Unbelievable. It's unreal. It's kind of like, this isn't the same thing, but I was the one who kept saying Gabe Rubio.
Right.
They didn't even need Gabe Rubio because Donovan Heinisch, we have a question, I think, in the second segment about him. And I won't gush quite yet, like I did in today's tail of the tape, but I thought he played well. As I always say, the view from the ninth floor isn't always the best. I thought he played well. He played better than that once I watched the recap of the game on TV.
Heinisch is, JB, Heinisch is 2 weeks in a row. And the real key for me is extra snaps. I thought Donovan Heinisch would be, 21, 22 snaps, maybe lose effectiveness when you get going. He's getting better at it. He talked about how he complements Gabriel Rubio well, and that was because I asked about Rubio, and those two have been playing side by side more. The Cross and Mills are the complements. He really complements Riley Mills well.
Yeah, he does. And they're 2 completely different players, even though they're both on the interior of the line. And again, we said going into last week that Heinisch had a great week of practice. He's not hitting a wall as he's gotten more intense action, more meaningful in-game snaps, as well as an increased practice workload. He's just continued to develop and get better and better. And I do think it's important to note, as you guys did over the weekend, that he is heavier than listed. He's up to almost 285 pounds.
He said 285 to me the other day. He's getting through. He was getting through the A gaps beautifully. He looks stronger at the point of attack. Again, I don't want to talk too much about him because I don't want to talk over the question in the second segment. But that leads me to, we haven't heard any complaints about Lauren Lando lately. Maybe there's injuries are still piling up. Look across the country. But I want to make this point. Every single week, the opposing team is dragging players off the field that are banged up and injured as Notre Dame's physicality takes charge every week. Why isn't anybody talking about Lauren Lando and his role in that? That's significant as well. And I think that's, if we're going to criticize when somebody goes down with an injury, let's call it evenly. Lauren Lando's offensive and defensive players are beating the crap out of people.
I think it's probably the imprint of the Under Armour cleats that are injuring visiting players.
I can't believe you went there, O'Malley. My gosh. I talked to someone over the weekend, actually, Saturday after Notre Dame's game, actually about Lauren Lando and the development and the growth of Notre Dame from a physical standpoint, and had it reiterated to me, this is a much twitchier team than Marcus Freeman has ever had among his 3. I think that's significant. And there was the feeling also, visiting with folks Saturday night, that it's just a team that's in really good condition, that is very physical, more physical than before. But I thought it was very interesting to even hear people close to the program talk about how even linemen, defensive linemen, or whomever are playing with fresher, more explosive legs later in the season.
Go Wang and ESQ Clothing have shared a preview of their secret Black Friday sale exclusive to Irish Illustrated. ESQ will match percentage-wise whatever Notre Dame scores against Army this weekend, November 23rd, using code Irish Illustrated. The sale will go live Sunday the 24th for 1 week, so be prepared to get gifting. Valid on online items only, not valid for gift cards. Coming up, segment 2, burning up the boards.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2. We call it Burning Up the Boards. Our first question from Jim_Booney CRS. He has something to say for Notre Dame fans watching the game the other day. Please speak your truths about Saturday's officiating.
JB.
Yeah, okay. So the one thing I'll say is that I found the ruled catch to Malachi Fields the most egregious and offensive moment of that game. I don't know how it wasn't reviewed. I don't know how the side judge or the umpire on that side of the field didn't see it live when our intern, Tom Zwiller, captured some photos of it. And there's plenty of video of it. And I don't think he took enough steps to make it considered a catch and fumble, which is what the stat broadcast initially reverted to. Marcus Freeman letting us know he asked about that. I'm befuddled as to how that could have not been reviewed in the moment. I also will point out that ESPN college football reporter David Hell said it's been a tough year for officiating nationwide, but the ACC has been particularly bad. That was a public statement from him over the weekend. I think that's pertinent. It is open to more scrutiny because of all the replays, because of all the money, because of all the revenue. But I think the ACC and Big 12 officiating have been, just absolutely bludgeoned this year, and largely rightfully so. We still don't know what a Big 12 official said to Deion Sanders allegedly 10 days ago in Lubbock, Texas, but Deion was taken aback and said, I couldn't believe he said it to me, and he knows he probably shouldn't have said it to me, but he's declined to elaborate further. Now, the only thing I want to clear up on the fake punt, as we've continued to do more research on it, and we wrote the big story on Football Scoop Sunday evening, I've heard from a number of coaches around sports, around college football, that indicate it is somewhat subjective. But here's the biggest thing I've heard that's most interesting, and this just happened as we walked to our cars after Marcus Freeman's press conference and instant analysis today. I had someone reach out to me and say that rule was actually changed in the middle of last month, which if you're having a rule change in the middle of the college football season, that's insane. But allegedly an email was sent out from the national coordinator of officials to all schools that the rule was changed in the middle of last month after South Carolina used it successfully. So I find that very interesting that allegedly, as it stands now, that play that the Irish ran wouldn't have been a penalty the first weekend of October, but could have been a penalty by mid-October. And I'm not suggesting that that Notre Dame didn't see that email or what. Who knows? Maybe, again, Notre Dame saw the email and there were still multiple interpretations of it, because I had a Power 4 special teams coordinator last night tell me we ran a fake punt earlier this season and we weren't penalized for it. And the officials came up to me after the game and just said, hey, by the way, we should have flagged you for that. So I think there's a lot of gray area. I was blown away that I had a coach reveal to me that we ran a successful fake punt this year in a major conference game with conference versus conference foe, and that it didn't get flagged. They used it. They scored off of that drive. And then officials told him after the game, hey, we should have flagged you on that.
Question from Gondorf, and that is 2 great fake punts this year versus Georgia Tech and Virginia, but both were used in surefire wins, including Georgia Tech in garbage time. What's the point of developing and working on amazing fakes if you're not going to employ them meaningfully?
I have always thought your best stuff should be saved when you need it most. But in the case of the Georgia Tech game, it was 17-7 with a totally stagnant Notre Dame offense after the first half. And in this game, it was the second quarter, and Notre Dame wasn't doing anything on offense. They're in the middle of 4 straight 3-and-outs and a fifth that followed. Notre Dame desperately needed the fake punt this time. This game turned around because the defense got mad and started picking off passes. The offense was doing nothing. They absolutely needed to use it this time.
I think I understand the nature of the question.
Yeah, because I like to save the best for Georgia and Alabama, but
right, and it
makes it necessary.
Right, and it makes a lot of sense to ask it, especially given the nature of those 2 games. I would say probably more so the Georgia Tech game. You didn't need to utilize it as much as this past weekend you were looking for a spark. But I'll give Marcus Freeman a tremendous amount of credit here. I think he does a really good job of having the pulse of his team and has a good in-game feel in these instances of when he needs to deploy a trick play or a fake punt or something like that. And I think he sensed that they were lethargic after getting an easy score to open the game on special teams, and he wanted to jumpstart his team again with this special teams trick play in this contest. So for me, I lean heavily into deferring to Marcus absolutely having the pulse of his team, and also knowing, as we said in instant analysis, there's a lot more junk in their bag. That's what a college head coach calls his trick plays to me. He says those are my junk plays. Well, Notre Dame's got a lot of junk in its trunk, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know that Notre Dame has a better one than that, Tim. You talked about saving the best. That one's pretty hard to top, but I also think that you'd like opponents to go into a game kind of fearing what you might do, and there are always offshoots of what you've done that can fool people because they're looking for something very specific now. So I understand the question, but Marcus Freeman talked about you practice. Dude, the dudes want to run it, and so rather than save it to the end, you treat every game like this week against Army. You treat it like it's a Super Bowl. He was saying that in reference to using everything in your trick bag regarding special teams. So I get the question, but I'm sure there's much more that Marty Biaggi can do that can throw opponents off.
This one was 7-0 though, right? I'm not wrong about that. It wasn't 4. It was 7-0.
Yeah, Faison's had the touchdown.
No, it was 14. No, it was 14.
It was 14-0.
It was 14-0.
Oh, I thought Faison's.
No, because they ended up when all was said and done, a few plays later they ended up
just turned 14-0.
It was 14-0. It made it 21-0.
That's definitely not garbage time. 14-0 in the middle of 5 3-and-outs.
No, definitely not. Question from K. Beasley: discuss the following. He actually wanted me to rate these, but I think it's just better if we just talk about these things. The 5 3-and-outs in the first half. I guess we've already kind of covered that. It's just
I have a stat on that actually. If you want to move on to the other one, I'll pull up my stat on that. It's in Monday Musings because I think it's relevant. In the first 5 games of the season, so pre-bye before they can do the self-scouting and everything, Notre Dame had 14 3-and-outs and another 11 empty possessions. So that's 25 possessions with nothing out of it. Didn't flip the field. Maybe got a first down, but they got less than 25 yards. So then in the next 3 weeks after the bye, playing Stanford, Georgia Tech, and Navy, 2 total 3-and-outs.
Wow.
And 3 empty possessions only. The last 2 weeks, they're back to 7 3-and-outs and 4 more empty possessions. I mean, remember Florida State, I don't count garbage time. Florida State put Notre Dame in 2 3-and-outs in a row to start the first quarter after Notre Dame had scored. So those definitely matter. I know they killed them, but you can't let these 3-and-outs creep back in against Army and USC and obviously against anybody else. So I do think if we're rating, that's the most relevant for me.
Yeah, I think as it pertains to Florida State, I think Florida State's defensive line is pretty damn good, and they were winning some battles up front. This was shooting yourself in the foot. This was self-imposed. Again, you don't want to keep hearing hands to the face, but if you keep putting hands to the face or getting fingertips caught in face masks, they're going to call those. And that's what the second part of this is, John. 1 second, please. 1 of 12 on third down. Those are tied in. That's why the 3-and-outs were coming.
Yeah, and you can't win against quality opponents, or certainly you can't win in the postseason if you're 1 of 12 on third down and a combined 4 for 16 on third and fourth downs. That's just not a recipe for success. The one thing I was going to note about the offensive line, and it stood out to me maybe a little bit more this week than in the previous weeks, I don't think Billy Schrauth is remotely near the Billy Schrauth he was before he got hurt. I don't think he's moving nearly as well. I've appeared to see him. I saw him appear to be a little bit limping coming off of a couple of plays in the game this past weekend, as well as against Florida State. And so I commend his effort, and he's clearly one of their best linemen, but he is not quite the same lineman he was before the injury.
The 10-yard loss by Jeremiah Love, that was Billy Schrauth cutting the guy loose. He lunged, he was beaten. And then at that point, Knapp was beaten and Love had nowhere to go. I agree. I think Schrouth I didn't notice as much this week, but certainly, is this his third? Was that his third game back? Certainly prior to this, definitely against Florida State, I saw him limping.
Fourth game back. He came back Georgia Tech.
Okay. All right. Still part of Kay Beasley's question asking about Mitch Jeter. Tim, Marcus Freeman talked about his situation going into this week.
They're going to need him eventually, but as we talked about on Instant Analysis about an hour ago, KB and I, at least, I think, Tim, you agreed with us. I don't think it's coming in Army when it's cold at night against Army either.
Tough time to do it, man.
Not if they're shutting him. I know Marcus said a 28-0 lead is not a time to bring him back, but the reason you're not bringing him back is it's too cold at the 28-0 lead, not because they felt like they don't need a good kicker when it's 28-0, because otherwise you'd have taken out Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard too. So I think he will be needed in Los Angeles at some point. I don't think you can go out there missing field goals or being afraid to kick a 44-yard field goal either.
No, I just don't think you can risk it. Like for the weather forecast this weekend in New York, with it being a night game, with it supposed to be windy, a little bit more chill because of the wind. They're being smart by letting Jeter continue to kick PATs because you want that repetition. You want that in-game experience. You want him to just be constantly honing his stroke on those PATs. But I don't think that we'll see Mitch Jeter try a field goal of substance this week against Army based on where things are. And you want him then to, in my opinion, try to have a meaningful field goal attempt at USC the next week so that he doesn't have an 8-week layoff between important field goals.
And then wrapping up this question, thoughts on Army's #1 ranked defense and Army's ability to run. They had a 21-play, 94-yard, 14-minute drive. That was North Texas, right? That was against North Texas. That's impressive. But I do have some thoughts. Tim, go ahead. You guys go ahead on Army's #1 ranked defense.
I think I know your thoughts, so I'll cede to you on that one.
Okay.
I'll go into the Army's 14-minute drive. I don't think Notre Dame is capable of giving quite that up, but I shouldn't say that. Florida State had one. What was Florida State's? 9 minutes, 16 plays? That's Florida State with the worst offense in the country. So maybe Army could run off a 14-minute. They have the worst offense in the country other than Kent State. They're fighting for it. Army does not. Army has a very efficient offense. And, okay, let's say there's 2 8-minute drives. Changes the game completely. 14-minute drive is unlikely. 1 8-minute drive a half changes everything. So
no doubt about it.
I'm going to ask Al Golden about that because you also can't be the defense that gets frustrated, takes a shot, and Army's waiting for that. And they're all of a sudden their 7-play drive turns into a 7-point drive on one throw.
The only offense that Army has faced this year that I have just a great deal of respect for their ability to score the football and what they do schematically is East Carolina. And the Pirates lingered for a really long time in that game with Army before Army won 45-28. But I think that's the high water mark for an opponent this year against the Army defense. I think some of those Army defensive numbers are skewed by how long their offense is on the field. And so, again, it's an incredibly well-coached veteran group that is incredibly sound. It's more athletic than a lot of previous Army teams, but I don't think that it has the athleticism to match up with the Irish across 4 quarters.
John, I would throw in North Texas, which is Chandler Morris, their quarterback, is averaging 343 yards passing per game, and Army shut that down.
Yeah.
Held them to 214 yards. He threw 2 interceptions, both coming in the end zone. So they did a really good job there. But we need to be realistic about Army being the #1 defense in the country because they've played a bunch of opposing offenses. The FEI, opponent adjusted efficiency rating. When you're talking about playing teams like Florida Atlantic, Rice, East Carolina, as you say, John, is good. Air Force is really, really down offensively. Tulsa is number 133 in that FEI rating. UAB is bad. They are beating up on some really, really bad offenses. So, Notre Dame, obviously, and we talk about the physicality of Army, and I believe that that's real. But against Notre Dame is one of the most physical teams in the country. So there still should be a gap. But I don't want to underrate Army's defense, but I also don't want to give it too much credit just because you look at the offensive efficiency of these teams, and they haven't. The two teams not on their schedule are the two best teams in the conference, and that's Memphis and Tulane.
I think
And
for
I would
people,
say just
Jimmy,
sorry, super quickly, that North Texas game, you make up a good point there, TP. I would also note that Army's offense possessed the ball for almost 42 minutes in that game, and North Texas still had 280 plus yards of offense in just barely 18 minutes on the field.
Interesting. I think that's a really good point. Where the time of possession
complimentary
is,
football.
yeah, I mean that's a significant favor for your defense. That's a great point, John.
Hey, T, I do want TP. I want to make this point. Like if you're sitting at home and you hear number 1 versus 48 versus 64, Army is grouped with it's Army, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Louisville are all within 10 spots in the FEI. So you're looking at a regular defense, not the number 1 ranked defense.
Yeah. All right, let's pick up pace a little bit here, boys. Question from N.E. Davis. Compare and contrast Navy and Army and what learned lessons Notre Dame can apply to the Black Knights. Marcus Freeman just said to us that Army is not Navy 2.0.
No, I think to Notre Dame's credit, it got Navy down early in that game, and I think made Navy get out of sorts and turned the ball over tremendously, very similar to the way that the Irish blew open the game this past weekend against Virginia. So I think it's pretty clear these are completely different teams. Army, a little more traditional. I like their quarterback a little bit better, Bryson Daly, than I do the Horvath kid, who, by the way, got injured early in Navy's game this past weekend, and that certainly contributed to the midshipmen getting blown out by Tulane. But I just think that Notre Dame has proved that it has learned from the scare of a few years ago, maybe in Marcus's first season as head coach against one of the service academies, and also think that Notre Dame continues to learn on a week in and week out basis from the disaster against Northern Illinois earlier this season.
I think the only concern I have for Army, well, quarterback, because also Horvath was hurt in the Notre Dame game too. He had a bad thumb pretty clearly. But like Pete Sampson mentioned, I think post-game podcast, if they have 1 turnover instead of 6, I mean, they dropped the ball 3 times. Navy, they dropped the ball 3 times.
No doubt.
Let's say they have 2 turnovers instead of 6. Notre Dame wins that game still 38-17. They would have still handled them. You just can't count on Army having a game like that where Navy was overwhelmed by Notre Dame, and we said multiple times Notre Dame's presence made Navy beat themselves, but Navy still beat themselves. They were terrible. I mean, that was as bad as you could play on offense. They weren't touching them when they're dropping the ball on half of them.
Brian Newberry said the moment was too big for his team. He was right. I mean, there was
exactly right, and that's good for Notre Dame too, but it won't always be that way.
Yeah, the Tesca kid, obviously the moment was too big. He's dropping pitches that he wouldn't normally drop. Let me just say Bryson Daly's thrown 51 passes total for 644 yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. The element of surprise works in his favor.
Mm-hmm.
He's already over 1,000 yards through 9 games, 1,062 yards on the ground, 21 touchdowns. He's a bigger kid. He has good size. And again, they've won 13 straight with him at quarterback, essentially, except for 1 game there. So there's some good stuff there from these guys. But again, Notre Dame, with the physical advantage, they need to accentuate that.
Next question is from Dr. Parnell 42. With Bo Collins having drop issues, do you believe we could get to see more Jaden Thomas this week, or will this be a game to get Colsey locked in again and his confidence back? Excuse me, Collins. I said Colsey. Get Collins locked in again and have his confidence back. I
mean, we don't have any indication that that's going to happen. We're talking about game 11 of the season, and as you said, Tim, Jaden Thomas just isn't getting a whole lot of reps. I think they still trust Bo Collins. I wrote it in today's tale of the tape. I mean, I think you understand why Clemson fans' hearts weren't broken when Bo Collins, if this is what Bo Collins is, this level of inconsistency, I would imagine over the course of the 3 previous seasons, it would drive you a little bit crazy.
I just think Thomas might be a tell when he comes in, because he's kind of cast as that. He comes in the slot, he can block like a tight end. Bo Collins is the back shoulder that Riley Leonard looks for, but you can't. To me, that was the worst drop. I don't know how to rank drops.
It was.
It was
It
just
was.
a
I mean,
beautiful
it was
pass
just
that that every receiver has to catch. That's why I thought it was one of the worst drops of the season. That's
I mean, it's just
it's your
why
moment to make a big play too.
I just don't understand. Wide open, nobody around him, not being threatened by anyone, and it's just it's like grabbing it and
Mm.
throwing it down to the ground. I just don't understand that, especially when you've had drop issues. Aren't you that much more focused?
That's a great point. Like
I'm
you had your drops already. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised at Jordan Faison's drops. I would expect him to be, more efficient than that.
Unless it's a little bit mental at this point for Bo
Yeah.
Collins, and he's over concentrating, or it's become a bit of the yips, like his version of Chuck Knobloch TP. He can't make the routine anymore.
Question from N Jacobs 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 9 or 10 being holding open tryouts and looking at the soccer team. How worried are you about the kicking situation?
I mean, I think it's going to cost us some point if Mitch Jeter's not back. Here's a problem. It's cold in December. I hope Mitch Jeter's healthy.
I think that's why you're seeing Notre Dame be extra judicious with Jeter's plan to return. And frankly, they haven't needed him yet, which is a good thing, obviously. But they haven't needed Mitch Jeter to line up and kick it's a game-winning field goal or try a game-winning field goal. So we don't know. I suspect if they were down 2 points and they needed Mitch Jeter to try a 45-yard or 48-yard field goal this past weekend, they would have gone to him and asked him, do you want to try this? And I think Mitch Jeter, the competitor that he is, would have wanted to try that. But as long as you can let him work his way back in, kick the PATs, and be smart about it, then I think you're okay. And again, this is where it's huge that Notre Dame doesn't have a conference championship game that could dictate its future in birth in the CFP. As long as Notre Dame handles business this weekend and next, it should be in the CFP, and you get Mitch Jeter an additional full 3 weeks to rest that leg.
Look, we all love the stories of the soccer players that come out and succeed. We know about the former soccer player kicking for the Dallas Cowboys, who's a complete outlier and a freak.
If he's in the soccer team right now, he should definitely come kick for Notre Dame.
Well, yeah,
that
definitely.
There,
but I think that whole notion is like a little bit of a needle in a haystack kind of thing. And as I said in this analysis, Zach Yoakum is. Look, he's on the practice field every day. He's kicking. He's having some success. He's getting repetitions. You're better off, just trying to instill confidence in him, not putting him in too many long distance situations. Now, he's got to hit a 36-yarder. I mean, he just yanked that one Saturday.
If there's someone that can actually pull it off like Pendergast or David Ruffer and Hall, and Ruffer's another all-time extreme example. He became the best kicker in the country for a year, Notre Dame history for 1 year. If there's someone that's viable to come in and look at, that is the spot. I'm saying that is the spot to make Zach Yoakum watch that guy come in.
Sure.
That you can't beat him out in practice. I don't want you on the field when Army at Yankee Stadium kicking a 40-yard field goal when it's 0-0 in the first quarter either. You need to be. I'm surprised. I don't know enough about place kicking, as Tim, as you say, it tends to not, once it starts one way, it continues to go that way. It goes straight, but doesn't always go straight down the middle. He is not a guy that folded, because his first kickoff ever, he found out he was Notre Dame's kickoff specialist 25 minutes before the Ohio State game. Like, that's amazing. So it's probably just he's more of a kickoff guy than a field goal guy. So at some point,
I was going to say, lot less pressure kicking off than there is kicking a field goal. You've got some leeway. It doesn't have to be within that parameter.
If I could real quickly jump back to the Bo Collins question, just because I've been wanting to do this stat and I just did it while you guys were talking. We discussed the drops and how bad Notre Dame has been for drops this year, and I wanted to dive into that a little bit more and look at Riley Leonard's numbers. And Riley Leonard's completing 64.7% of his passes right now. Notre Dame now has about 23 drops on the season. If you just say 18 of those drops belong to Riley Leonard as the quarterback, then you change him from a 64.7% passer to a 72% passer. Wow. I think that's pretty telling. And we don't know what it would do for his yardage. I think it's conservative to say that's probably another 200 yards in passing yardage that he would have. And then Matt Freeman, our friend at Irish Sports Daily, had a great stat over the weekend that he put out, and that is that Riley Leonard's total offense this year through 9 games or 10 games now is almost identical to Sam Hartman a year ago, total offense through 10 games. And I think Riley Leonard maybe is responsible for more touchdowns at this point in time than Sam
Oh,
Hartman
I'm
was.
sure he is. Yeah, with the running. Yeah.
I actually put that in tail of the tape today. Riley Leonard, since Northern Illinois, has accounted for 24 touchdowns and the 2 interceptions. So his productivity has been outstanding. And John, if there are 18 drops, if you cut that in half at 9, Riley Leonard he's at like right around 68, 69%,
Exactly.
which is really, really good for him.
2 things really quickly. We all know one of those. I'm glad JB said that if you just take away, maybe attribute 18 to Leonard, we know one drop was Steve Angeli throwing, because that's the best pass of the year that bounced off Michael Gilbert's chest in the end zone.
That's right.
So I know that was not on Riley Leonard, but I did a quick look since JB brought it back up. When I mentioned Jaden Thomas might be a tell, he has 4 passes to him over 10 yards this year. Everything else is under 10 yards. Bo Collins has 16.
Oh, wow.
So they just trust him down the field more than Jaden Thomas.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not, everybody gets passes that are under 10 yards these days, but they trust Bo Collins to get downfield and be a threat more. That's why I asked you during the game, where's Jaden Thomas? Why can't Jaden Thomas come in? Because I don't like drops. So as soon as that happens, I put on my fan watching the game hat and say, get him off the field. I want to see Jaden Thomas. Thomas played 25 snaps. That's more than usual. Maybe there's a threat.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're going to drop the ball. We're going to play somebody else in block.
Yeah. No, there should be. Question from Need a Turnover. Can we take a minute to appreciate defensive line coach Al Washington? Outside of RJ Oben, almost every defensive lineman seems to have exceeded expectations. And I'll say this, let me just insert this. Oben's played some of his best football the last 2 weeks, especially against Florida State.
I mean, I think it's a great question, because if you look at Notre Dame's top 10 players, when healthy, Howard Cross is one of them, and Riley Mills. Okay. When they were playing and healthy, Jordan Botello and Boubacar Traore were in the top 10 as well.
Top 10 also.
If you want to look at the top 10 players recently in the last 2 games, Donovan Heinisch is one of them. And if you want to look at one of the best rookies over the course of the season, Bryce Young is one of them. And the guy we all needed back is Josh Burnham with a good 3-game stretch. And the guy everybody buried, Junior Tuli Halamaka, had a full good month of football. Right. It's incredible how well those players have done.
And a week ago, I was going crazy about Gabe Rubio, how he played against Florida State.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Need a turnover. Excellent.
I mean, yeah, now they need some more of those guys coming next season, because a lot of those guys won't be here or be fully healthy next year.
Question from Brian B2B. With the end of the season on the horizon, what are the chances that both coordinators are with Notre Dame next year?
Normally, I just say the under. But Mike Denbrock just joined, so I make it.
Mike Denbrock's not going anywhere.
I'm going to say, because I like to have good things and I don't want to kill Christmas or puppies, that Al Golden stays too.
I think it would take something incredibly, I don't even know the word I'm searching for here, to get Al Golden to leave. I don't see a scenario where Mike Denbrock leaves. He got a 4-year deal. He wanted to be back at Notre Dame. He wanted to be back closer to his family, to his grandkids. And again, he's among the top 5 highest paid offensive coordinators in all of college football. So I don't see that. Al Golden is so damn good running a defense that he will have more schools reach out to him than what I think he would be willing to listen to. And I'll tell you that I've learned within the past week. I knew that he rebuffed Syracuse a year ago. I did not know until more recently the extent to which he rebuffed Duke in order to stay at Notre Dame. I think that's important to know. I think that's also telling. And he also, as we first reported months ago, has got a new 4-year extension after last season that pays him north of $2 million per year, as well as their bonus incentives and things like that. So I think it would have to be an incredibly compelling job that has everything to give him one final chance as a head coach to go be a winner. I don't know about the NFL. The NFL for a long time lagged behind college in terms of coordinator pay. Now it's much more common for NFL coordinators to be making $3, $4, $5 million a year.
Jason Garrett.
I'm sorry, Tim. Al Golden talks about Notre Dame coaching Notre Dame student athletes a lot.
Yeah,
every interview he does, he says, "Keep recruiting like the guys we have. That's what I want."
And collegiately, I think this is going to be a pretty muted cycle. I've actually got a pretty in-depth piece about to drop this afternoon on Football Scoop, just setting the scene at some of the openings that are already out there, and as well as what we're hearing from a collective group of staffers at Football Scoop for the rest of the industry. Not only has Florida made it clear that Billy Napier is apparently safe, I continue to hear and was told this morning that Sam Pittman likely is safe at Arkansas. Those were considered two of the more appealing potential Power Four conference openings that were expected that are not quite expected anymore. North Carolina, I think, will probably be the most appealing job that's expected to come open in this cycle.
I put this in tail of the tape today. Near the end of the broadcast, Jason Garrett goes on a long dissertation about what a great coach that Al Golden is, and if you're a school president or athletic director, look toward Al Golden. I'm like, could you please stop talking about that and trying to alert these people to take them away? But look, obviously the NFL is whereas we know that Mike Denbrock is perfectly comfortable coming back to Notre Dame, and whatever happens after that contract, he'll be in his 60s by that point. El Golden, a little bit different situation because he came to Notre Dame from the NFL, and a coordinator's job would be attractive. But JB, your insight and your input on that means a lot there. So hopefully both stay here. Question from Martin Evenflow: who had Donovan Heinisch as the number 2 sacks leader this year on your bingo card? What makes him as productive as he has been?
Nobody had him number 2 on their bingo card. I don't think anybody had Notre Dame as getting better rushing the passer overall in terms of production when they lost their 2 best pass rushers.
Unbelievable. Unreal. El Golden. There's the explanation.
Well, and again, he is a different dynamic, and I do think that he benefits from being a different type of body in there alongside of a Riley Mills or a Howard Cross, and that makes him a little bit tougher to block. He's proved to be more explosive. Again, I'll go back to our earlier comments on Lauren Lando and his impact on the program, and I think that Donovan Heinisch has shown an ability to do what the coaches call, and that is get skinny, to get in between blocks and be more effective in getting to the quarterback.
The other thing is, of course, that Traore and Botello are out, and those two guys would have been, they would have been 1-2 probably in sacks. But Donovan Heinisch doing a hell of a job. Moving on to DMB 346, is there any chance Benjamin Morrison returning to Notre Dame in 2025? I think we would like to answer this once and for all now.
No.
Yeah, there's no scenario. I've spoken to people in his camp. He had the surgery. Normal recovery time is around 3 months per an athletic trainer who works with an NCAA football team for that labrum repair in the hip. I think he'll be able to be recovered and trained and be fully able to participate, maybe not in every single drill at the combine or whatever, but I don't see a scenario whatsoever where Benjamin Morrison returns in 25, and I don't think Notre Dame sees that scenario either.
I mean, I'll just say one thing, and I think what JB is saying is absolutely right. But if he were to have maybe a setback in his recovery, maybe that might give him some pause, because it might impact where he's drafted then. But that's not anticipated. We're not going to sit around hoping that, his rehab takes a turn south. It is what it is. And look, even without him, Notre Dame's pretty damn good at cornerback.
In our final question, you have to answer that. You have to take that one, as I have to bounce everybody.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep.
The question is from Judge Arthur Vandelay. Not to read too much into wins over Stonehill, Buffalo, and Georgetown, but do you think the men's basketball team has a better shot at making the tournament than previously thought? Against Georgetown, they looked light years better than they did at any point last year.
Look,
I don't know. They made a run at
early. Yeah, it's early. But I think, again, I'll stick to the fact that I expect this to be a team in late February and early March that is in the conversation for an NCAA tournament bid.
Fair enough. And the performance against Georgetown, before the football team played, was outstanding. They took Georgetown out of their game. I asked, was it making Georgetown take bad shots, or is Georgetown inclined to take bad shots? And it's probably some combination of the two. I respect Ed Cooley as a coach, but he doesn't have control of that Georgetown program quite yet. I don't want to ever overestimate a team within the first 3 games, non-conference games of the year. Buffalo and Stonehill should not compete with Notre Dame. Buffalo did, Stonehill didn't. I don't think that we will this week. There are 2 home games, North Dakota and Elon. I don't think that's going to be real telling, but if you want a telltale signs, they're coming next week when Notre Dame goes to Las Vegas. They'll play Rutgers, they'll play Houston, and then a third opponent to be determined, which could be Alabama, but probably won't be. I don't think it will be, because I think it depends upon the outcomes against Rutgers and Houston. And then the following week, Notre Dame goes to Athens to play Georgia on December 3rd. So we're going to have a lot more evidence coming up, but I would agree, other than the offensive rebounds that they gave up the other day against Georgetown, they looked really, really good. Offensively, they've scored in the 80s all 3 games, which is a huge step forward. Last year they averaged in the 60s. They look like a team that could easily average in the 70s. And so they're off to a good start, but more to come.
Yep.
JB's out. We're wrapping up.
Go.
Okay, this has been the latest from Irish Illustrated Insider. Thanks for joining us, Tim Priester. And there goes JB. Tim O'Malley already on the road. We'll talk to you again. Once again on Wednesday, we'll have a recap of the College Football Playoff Committee's voting on Tuesday night. Look for Notre Dame to move up a spot, possibly 2, as they did in the Associated Press poll. Until then, Tim Priester signing off. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.